Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allow me to welcome you all for this first webinar with a very nice title of Innovation for Response to COVID. I start by thanking Egypt University as well as Arabian Gulf University for the co-organization of this series of webinar in innovation. I'm very happy to be with you today, tonight, in this kind night. I thank Professor Oda for the introduction. In fact, my talk today will be very simplified in terms of concept. I will be focusing in giving little of view of what is innovation first. Then I'll be going to give you kind of little thinking to start the debate. The agenda of the talk will be very simplified, starting by giving a very primer idea about the world before COVID and little information regarding COVID, and going through the historical crisis which we have been using innovation to find a new solution, a new remedy for the catastrophes or the situation. I will be going also for some example of where are today some of the innovative solution we found. A lot of people around the world are working to create a solution and to overcome the situation. In fact, we are witnessing greatly a time where we have that kind of new vocabulary, new speech, new words in our today life. We are all getting used since about 3 months or 4 months little with some expression like quarantine, economic slowdown, business stop, or revenue drop, livelihood damage, job loss, informal workers, break global chain. In fact, we are talking about globalization, digitalization, sorry, in terms of globalization. We don't hear a lot of people talking about globalization, but everyone is talking about the digitalization. We think about keeping people safe and keeping business alive. We think about the debt and bankruptcy and stimulus measures. We are thinking a lot of ideas which we have to go for what's going on and what's after that. If I take a quick look of what's going on after the shock of COVID-19, we have a tremendous economic impact on the COVID-19, like the loss of GDP, the loss of plenty of, 3% of loss of the global GDP is about 3.5 trillion US dollar. We have about 2.7 billion of workers are affected by the lockdown and by the separation, social distance, and working from home. About 81% of the world population or forced population, 13.5 trillion US dollar global outstanding. We have tremendous amount of debits, and we are estimating that we are facing real question of non-paid debits due to the fact that a lot of financial sector activities are slowing down. We have about 20% of fall of remittance. We know that remittance is one of the source for poor families in poor countries where their leader of the household are working in other countries and transferring money monthly. We have about 20% of remittance of that, which equal to about 445 billion US dollar, which is a considerable amount of money. We have recently heard that African Union estimated that we have about 200 billion US dollar of the loss from the GDP of African countries. Already 38 African countries are requesting the support from the IMF. And we have finally what we call the stimulus measures, which are measures set down by the governments to face the consequences. We have about 5 trillion US dollar already spent on that. In fact, to talk about the global shock caused by COVID-19. COVID-19 is really going through very different aspects. And here in front of us, we have that projection of the growth, global growth of the world since year 2000. And we see that we had kind of drop here in 2008 due to the financial crisis. And we are here heading in 2020, where we have a very pessimistic kind of projection, where those drops we have a very pessimistic and optimistic. We are reaching 1.2 instead of having the growth rate, or we might have a 1.2 loss. We have 22.5. Even we have an estimation of having 8.8 loss of the global growth, which is a tremendous, never happened before. We have also impact on the life, like the drastic changes in work condition, in health, and education, in trade. We are saying that a lot of people now, the schools are switching to be distance from home. We are switching a lot of jobs to be working from home. We have the global value chain is stopped, and we have local trade, because we don't have a lot of traffic, international traffic. Flights are stopped, and some activities are extremely slowed down. So we have kind of world which is very disturbed world, which is not so much as it was. And I use here the quote of Mark Morrow. Mark Morrow expected, unfortunately, that 1 month, the cost of 1 month during the COVID might cost 10 years of progress. And the fight against inequality. Morrow talks about the question of inequality in terms of underdeveloped world, and particularly we are talking about more than 10 million jobs at risk. Are often those jobs are either low wage, low profit, we call it tip-based jobs. So we are facing a tremendous challenge for particularly poor countries and bottom of the line jobs, or that gig economy. So in fact, as we have seen that crisis is really impacting everything, impacting the economic situation, the education, the health, the number of deaths. I didn't mention in the beginning that we have about more than 4 million people are already contaminated by the virus, and we have about 300,000 deaths, which is a tremendous amount of people, and it has a kind of impact. So let's try to have a step back and look in the history, some examples of what we have done in the other crisis. I like to mention always this deep, what we call it, the Great Depression. In fact, that the American dream, which we keep saying, American dream was growing all the 19th century until the end of the 1920s, where really American economy was booming, and it was really the achievement of what they call it American dream. We have some figures showing that the welfare of the United States was maximum, to the point that we have 1 car for 5 people in America. However, we have 1 car for 42 people in UK, or 325 in France, or even 7,000 people in Russia. The global economy was really America was taking a large portion of the global economy just after the First World War. We have about 55% of steel production, about 60%, about 40% of foundries, about 70% of oil production in the world. So America was, until the end of years 20, in a booming era, and sudden we have that Great Depression, where we have some people are saying that the economic growth and the cycle of growth with depression and growth with depression reached a point where we found ourselves in 1932 with a huge kind of crisis. Unemployment is exceeding 12 million person, in the first and biggest in the history of the United States. We have about 5,000 banks are stopping, are liquidated and bankrupted. And we have the economy, the whole American economy was collapsed. And you know, in front of the crisis, what was the reaction of the leaders and the country? leaders, the government. At that time, we had the President Hoover, who has kind of conviction to be very depending on individual reception and, you know, these institutions. He didn't want to have a huge importance from the institutions' reply, and he was focusing in the individual reply. So the time of President Hoover until he was elected 1929 until 1932, when the President Roosevelt came up. President Roosevelt was very creative, and that's why I bring that Great Depression era as example, because Roosevelt was the first to innovate and to use an innovative way of dealing with a crisis by creating, what did he call it, brain trust. He first created a small circle of think tank where we are bringing and collecting the professor, the eminent people in the country, like top professor, top business people, and you know, thinker, to brain and to plan and he called it the Plan Commission for address the depression, and he got out of that a lot of ideas. It was like a brainstorming session, a huge country brainstorming session, and also he ordered very creative idea that he ordered the fund of the governments to be submitted through a competition where NGOs and all the states are having the chance to look for a challenge or a problem and to find a solution and to propose the solution for the government to be funded. So he was using the federal money with a very smart way. This is the first example. The second example we know all is Ebola. Ebola was a kind of very killer, virus, spread it into 2014 in West African countries. He was really devastating, and he killed about 12,000 persons during a very short time. He stayed about 2 years until the end of the crisis. But Ebola virus spreading in the West African countries was one of the eminent let's say motive for a lot of healthcare innovation. And if you look for a lot of breakthrough in the healthcare was started by that corona, by the Ebola. And see, I have here in front of us some example. The first bracelet was wearable patient sensor. The first use of Internet of Things was coming with Ebola. What we have seen here in the upper right side of the picture, that the bracelets which were distributed for the people who are contaminated or supposed to be contaminated, so we can track them, we can understand their status, we can even take some measures remotely. And it was the first application during the Ebola. We have this, what we call it, mobile decontamination chambers, as we have a very poor infrastructure for the healthcare in those countries. So we have to create an innovative system where we can implement it. We take it as a mobile demounted and put it aside. We have also IT was very fruitful use in this crisis. We have different platform of sharing information like this ComCare. ComCare is a platform where we can share information regarding the cases, the symptoms, the places where we can get care, the number of people are already contaminated, and how can we access the services. However, this mHero was a small app which working in the old mobile cell phone without this smartphone to be able to generate a database on the cases. So doctors were able to trace and to write down what are the minimum information regarding the cases, so we can build kind of database. So from the two examples I just mentioning, we find that the crisis is a state of change. In fact, everything is changing, everything is giving some time for losers and some time for winners. And what we have to do in that kind of sphere of a change, that we have to look for the opportunities. And I reuse the quote of the very famous quote, which is needed the mother of invention. That quote, it gives us the way that, okay, once we have a crisis, we have a kind of situation where we are blocked. Our resources is not enough. Our way of thinking is not enough. Our way of doing is not enough. So we have to invent. We have to look for a solution. And solution might come with innovation. In fact, I try to summarize what are the major definition of innovation, because, if you look for the handbooks and the websites, and if you Google innovation, you will find plenty of definition of what is innovation. So I try to have a kind of standard definition of sample definition of innovation. So some basic definition that innovation is the exploration of knowledge to produce new goods and products or new ways of introducing them. It's just doing things differently with a new product or new services, or even innovate what's existing. This is the simplest definition of innovation. People on the business side take always innovation in terms of doing new things better and better value, because here we talk straightforward regarding the value. When you have your mobile, if you have your iPhone, every year we have a new version of iPhone. Every year we have new things inside, but we have also a different price. And you are motivated to buy every year that kind of new things, which is innovative things inside. And that's what we call it sustainable innovation. We have also what we call it social innovation. You know, people who are taking care of the social side of life, what we have as a social problem. When we are living in a poor area, poor village, we have very uneducated portion of the poor village. You have empathy for the education, so you can start a small business to tackle that problem. So social innovation is a social product or services in its end. It means that it is a social product is prepared for a social cause. So, and the benefits individual or social group concerned by the change. It means that we do social business because we have kind of compassion. We have a kind of desire to face a social problem, but also we know we need to make money. We need to make self-employment in case, but social enterprise is always something which has a mission, but also is a business. If you talk about the governments are also innovating, and we'll see a lot of public innovation. In fact, public innovation is a government sector innovation. Once they try to introduce new services or product or improving existing one. Look for the e-government, you know, these electronic government services. Historically, governments were delivering services on offices and you know, in a physical way. And since about 15 years, 20 years, we'll start to talk about e-government. You know, we can apply for our services through a platform, and this is kind of innovation. Innovation is not only to be online, but also to change the policies, to change the behavior change. A lot of cases in the world, we are facing the change of behavior of citizens through a campaign orchestrated by the government. So the government is also trying to face new problem with new solution. And we come to the last definition, which is more important for us for this lecture, which is open innovation. In fact, open innovation is really one of the drastic change in innovation. It is involvement of people. Let's say that before we have that history of having few people who are sitting in their laboratory to design and to produce and to make R&D for the sake of kind of research and scientific outcomes. Sometimes we go for making money, sometimes just for the breakthrough of science. Here we talk about normal people. You know, open innovation is when we bring the stakeholder, normal people, to the scene, and we think about the challenges and to think about how to go for find kind of new solution for those challenges. So if we follow very simply what is a measure, you know, how can you think that innovation happens? In fact, innovation happens in the intersection of the three circles. We have first technology, as we mentioned, that we have a drastic, you know, improvement and progress in terms of technology, ICT, and Industry 4.0. We have plenty of things which is coming from the technology side, Internet of Things, and all of these platforms are facilitating the use of technology for different things. For example, the crowdfunding, which is using a platform on the internet as a platform for finance. People are having the money, they will put their ideas, and sponsors or investors will go and spend their money or invest their money on the platform. We call it crowdfunding. If we don't have the technology, we don't have the crowdfunding. If you go for the business, every single idea, every single innovation or new products should be viable, should having a kind of commercial value. If it doesn't have a commercial value, it wouldn't be considered as innovation because no one will spend the money for it. So the business side, we have plenty of change is coming from the business side. A lot of companies are starting with a lot of expectation and a lot of merge, internationalization. Many things is happening in terms of business, which are forcing people to innovate, forcing an industry to innovate. I'm just mentioning the iPhone, but if you go for any products, Toyota car is competing with other type of models of cars, so they have to have different model with more incentive, with more facilities, and that's kind of motive for innovation. And we have last but not least circle, which is a crowd. Crowd here, within the time, within the years, we find that people have more and more expectation. They are using technology, they are interacting with business, so they became kind of a large source of innovation. And we more and more use the term crowd innovation, crowdfunding, crowdsourcing. So that's open us to kind of, imagine that during the COVID-19, I'm just mentioning the types of innovation according to my definition previous, and some example. If you look for some innovation, currently very developed innovation for some apparatus, like we have a James Dyson, which is a very rich British entrepreneur who is having already established home appliances factories, and he started to produce the apparatus, for ICPU units, where he has kind of tremendous progress. Within 10 days, he was able to produce his own brand. We have another device which is very crucial one, which is for testing the rapid assessment, or rapid test for the COVID test, where we have a problem currently with COVID that plenty of people don't have, we don't know they are contaminated or not. We have to be ensured once we do the test. So the question currently that a lot of tests take kind of 4 to 5 days between taking the sample until the results. And this was one of invention when we have to get out immediately within 5 minutes, only 5 minutes to get out results. Here we have an example from Singapore, which is very technology-based innovation, where we have the device, that the small device to take the temperature when people are going. This device is replaced by a sample, very small device, which attached to the cell phone, normal cell phone. So we can use the camera of the cell phone with the device to have that thermal image. So this invention was supported by the Singaporean government, and it was implemented immediately. It took kind of a few days of invention then to produce it. If we go for another example, governmental innovation, the photo on the left represents a hospital in Wuhan in China, where it was built in 8 days. So within 8 days in February 2020, we have a very drastic, impressive decision from the government of China and Wuhan state to build within 10 days only an entire hospital with 1,000 bed, which was a first in history. That with speed of decision, this is kind of public innovation, because we decided suddenly to face the problem with innovative solution. The second photo here represents one of the convention center in New York City, where they decided to convert it into a hospital with 3,000 bed, and it was built like this within 10 days. I mean, the mayor of New York imagine that we have a crisis, we will have a need, so we have to get kind of solution. What are the solution? And here, this is one of very symbolic public innovation, where we try to reuse the way of delivering the services differently. And this is very nice example. We have a last example also from Singapore, where starting from January 2020, when the government of Singapore were willing to have kind of quick information. People are asking, it was very, when COVID erupted, was unknown before, we don't know what to do. So it was a kind of platform invented by the government just to be able to make a quick and easy searching for public health prevalence. We would like to go for a clinic, we'd like to get a test, we'd like to know if I have some symptom, I would like to ensure that my symptoms are the same symptoms of the COVID-19, or I might be mistaken. So I have to go, I don't know where to go. So the website is Musk to go where, a very symbolic name even, and within few days it was kind of covering about 500,000 visitors the website and register it, and people are now use it as kind of source information. So here we are, people are willing to know what's happening, where I go, what are the cases, how can I identify the symptoms. Such kind of ideas, very simple idea, but we call it, this public innovation because it's coming from public sector. Last example, which is very symbolic here, this is in left, where people are standing in a way that they are respecting the social distance, and very symbolic. We have this, what we call it, nudge sign, just to identify where we have to stand. Those ideas, I mean, even in the left, when we push the button, you put this wooden stick just to push the button with, instead of having your finger. This is a crowd innovation. That's what we call it, crowd innovation. Crowd innovation might be anything we can imagine, we can design, we can apply, and it is a solution. So in front of us, very simple idea, really very basic ideas, but it's working and it solves an issue. So what we have to get from this quick introduction regarding the innovation, that we have to stop with Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker is a guru of innovation and entrepreneurship. And he has a very nice quote saying that entrepreneur always search for change, responds to it, exploits it, and as an opportunity. The most important thing that the entrepreneurs are always looking for the change. Let's say that what we have today in our case, in our country, in our room here, we are little impacted by the COVID-19, and it has changing our life. So that's the entrepreneurs are looking for, and within that change, entrepreneurs are looking for the opportunity. So looking for the opportunity, this is a major lesson we are getting out of this lecture, that innovation means transforming a crisis into opportunity. So if we talk about transforming the crisis into opportunity, it means we talk about enterprise, about money. So we use also this very nice, theory of getting from Peter Drucker, mentioning that, entrepreneurship is an art and science. A lot of people thinking that, okay, we can learn entrepreneurship. We can go for a course, for a training course for a few days, and we be entrepreneurs. And here we can educate, we can get lessons from university, PhD, whatever. All what's happening is okay, but we have to be back and thinking, we are in two different ecosystem. The first ecosystem is, if we start to explorating what is an opportunity, to find the idea. This is an art, find the idea, generating the opportunity, shaping the idea, having a more and more perception. What will be this idea? How can I exploit it? How can I get out of the idea? Recognizing the market, everything considered to be imaginative, and getting things from the creation. It is an art of creating the idea. Once we finish it through the identifying the markets, and we find here, identify and learn for the competition, here we start to talk about business. Once I get my idea, I go for the market, so I go for the science. So business is science, business is a plan, is business plan, is business model, is to clarify how to reach market, how to make pricing, how to produce, how to make contracting with a provider, with alliance, with corporates with which you are negotiating. So all of this is science. So it's very important to move smoothly from art to science. If we don't move from art to science, we have here what we call it the valley of death. Valley of death is the area where we have no finance. We didn't study well the period of developing the idea, and we can't reach the market. So it's very important to look for that kind of how idea will be transforming into business, and how the business will be viable. And the slide in front of us is talking about the history of open innovation, because in a crisis, we have everyone to think about the solution. So we have to invite people to be innovative. So the chart is very simple, saying that the history of innovation, we started 19th century by people are taking care of innovation in labs, in laboratory and research centers, and academic people who are collaborating to create innovation. Then in 90s, in 50s until 90s, we have more discussion group, design competition, we have customer feedback, we have expert group, we have external resources, and we start to have little participatory design. However, now since the end of 19, the era of the open innovation, where we have what we call it co-creation. Co-creation is a merge of two institutions. We might have an institution like healthcare institution is merging, thinking to find solution with an IT department of a company. So the co-creation, one have the problem and one are very expert in one domain, and we co-create together. We can co-create also with other stakeholders. You know, we would like to find a solution in our village. So we bring the people from the village, we bring a citizen, NGO, corporates, bankers, and we co-create together. And that's what the new way, open source, participatory. Once I mentioned that we bring people, so it is participatory, and we use also social media. And that comes to define what is open innovation, because it's very important to know that open innovation is involving people, and that's what we have now in need, that we involve everyone. So it is kind of involving people is operational most of the time. So we look for how to do things differently, is also impacting the policy. So we can think about the policy, why we don't do so, why we don't use a convention center in a time when it is closed to be a hostel for contaminated cases, for example. That's kind of policy, culture also, the openness, the learning knowledge, how can we transfer that knowledge? Now we are suffering in the third world, let's say in countries like Egypt, who are suffering from people, the awareness and the culture of people are little denying somewhere to comply with the rule that you have to keep social distance and you don't have to go to some places to gathering because we can contaminate people or you can be contaminated yourself. So that kind of opening is important. Open innovation will has a tool. Once we think about to use open innovation, use very simple tool, which is now very successful, which we call it design thinking methodology or tool. The design thinking methodology was developed by Mr. David Kelly. In fact, it's very simple. If you go from left to right here, the graph, we have a problem. So we start by understanding the problem, empathy. So it means that we give more care, more side inside the problem. We define the problem, then we go to ideate some solution. So we know well the problem, so how to solve it. So we go to prototype, then we go to test the prototype, then to implement. That way of doing things, and every time we go back, if it doesn't work well, we go back in each stage. That's how we can design things. Design the way of thinking, the way of finding the solution. In fact, design thinking is being used for solving complex problems, but in a participatory way, because we are now in a participatory way and iterative way as well, because we go back once we don't like what we did, so we can go and improve it. I will give you some example quickly because of the time of the lecture is very limited, unfortunately, and to give time for the questions after. That how to use innovation and design thinking phase of COVID. I try to use some example. So we'll be using exact way of the design thinking process. We have the problem, we'll discover the problem, define it, and then we go for the opportunity. Once we go to the ideate and find development of the ideas, we go for the solution. That's what we use, and how to use it, very simple. First we have to understand the challenge. So one of the challenge, I use here the quote of Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt is ex-CEO of Google, who mentioned that COVID is an information problem. You know what is COVID is an information problem? It means that once we have the biggest problem and challenge we have today in all over the world, that we don't know who is contaminated and how can we be in a distance from whom. Which one of our friends, which one of our family. And once we have to be tested, and we don't have tests everywhere, so the areas where we have a highest level of contamination might need more medical care, more medical supply. I mean, that kind of problem. So if you look for COVID, you can follow the angle of Eric Schmidt and say that COVID is an information problem. So now you have to solve the information problem. You have to think about solution where you engage data. If you go for the second, our Achim Steiner, the current head of the UNDP, he defined 3 axes for the work of UNDP: supporting the health response, including procurement and supply of essential health products under WHO leadership, and strengthen the crisis management and response, and addressing critical social. So if you like to look for the COVID as opportunity, you have 3 opportunities: either to work in supply health response, or to work in strengthening the crisis management. I just mentioned the website in Singapore, Mask Where to Go. It is just management of the crisis, addressing critical mass and economic impact like poverty and that. I try here to summarize, according to me, the major challenges or discover the real problems out of COVID. We need to have fast virus detection surfaces or devices. We have to have intensive care beds. We have to have ventilators, sterilization or disinfection. That question of really disinfection tools is important everywhere, and we need quantities. So we have to think about, those are awareness. Those are some areas where we are having opportunities. So people after that, what they have to do, they have to go back and to find, you know, after identifying some cases, we have to go for what we call it innovation arena, where people will think about the solution. I gave you some problems. Now we have to go for the next step, which invitation to open innovation. So open innovation will happen through hackathons, through competition. Here we have an example from the States, from the organization Idea Scale, where they open for COVID-19 crowdsourcing challenge. So people are asked to find solution for humanity biggest challenge and existing. That's, you have to go for a website and find the condition. So that issue is to find, you give people the problem and you will think about the ideation and the solution. Here we're pitching for the idea. So people are getting more and more ideas. So we go for the real opportunity, and I have to give the real example. So the process is starting by find the real problem, understand the problem, idea to find solution, make kind of hackathon, and incubate and realize the founded idea, or let's say it became commercialized businesses. Here I will give you some example which were developed quickly during the era of COVID, last 5 months. We have a company, all of those companies are startup companies, which I will go quickly. This company is giving a solution for personalized at-home screening. We need to get home screening. This buoy-based IO-powered health assistant. This is another system where we are using artificial intelligence to get kind of assistant for people. I will go quickly. Orbita is one chat solution for healthcare and science actor. This is a mobile application where doctors can chat and can exchange their experience. Here we have Doc. This is a clinical team work better together and with mobile application. This kind of proposing exchange between doctors and find the proper doctor. So a lot of application healthcare. We need. We don't forget that about. Elder people are really forgotten in this crisis, and a lot of people are getting, alone, and particularly either in elder housing or elder centers or at home. So we need kind of assistant care services at home. This is ideas. We have even yoga, or we have animation. Those someone is using VR to animate the elders at the elder centers during the COVID lockdown, and we have education solution. You have even sample solution for looking for the schools. If you are now looking for the school, so how can you are not able to go and visit the school? Anyway, so after, just to end, after COVID-19, resilience is a requirement. So we stop now before ending the lecture saying, okay, what's after the COVID-19? COVID-19 is a crisis, and every crisis we have to think about how we come back, how we bounce back, what are our elasticity, strength and force, which will be putting us back in our track. And we talk about resilience. In fact, the need to open innovation in university, in bank, and health institution, and companies, individuals is very important. All have to incubate innovation ecosystem. To incubate innovation ecosystem, we don't have better than what we call it innovation box. Innovation box is the area where we can innovate. I guess all big universities worldwide having what they call it innovation lab, living lab, innovation fintech lab in banks, and this all the name of innovation sandboxes. And if you imagine what is innovation sandbox, the word sandbox gives us the impression about the beach where we try to build with the sand and to play with the sand. So exactly when you do innovation, you have to play, you have to find solution, you have not to be fair from the failure or doing things bad, because you can repeat it and you can repeat it until you find better thing. That's the giving, the major term of sandbox. In fact, our greatest glory, I went by the Confucius quote, our greatest glory is never to fall, but to be ascended every time we fall. This is very important, to be able to bounce back, to use our resilience and think how can we overcome this kind of challenges. I thank you for your time. I will let a little time for the question. Thank you again.